Why was New Life Evangelistic Center forced out of 1411 Locust? Because it's strategically planned gentrification. We're going to take a look at that during this program. Be sure you stay tuned. I'm Larry Rice, and this is Here's Help. For 46 years now, I've seen gentrification at work. What is gentrification? Stacy Sutton defines it this way as the process by which higher income or higher status people relocate to invest in low-income neighborhoods. In doing so, they inflate property values, displace low-income people, and fundamentally alter the culture and character of the neighborhood. When New Life Evangelistic Center first moved in the 1411 Locust building, there was in that General American building, that big white building behind me here. It was a big office building. Nobody bothered. The homeless were there. They were in the neighborhood. But then they converted it to lofts. And then we began to see that the person that owned the parking lot next door to us, the Brad Waltrip family, owned 23 properties in the area, had managing control of those lofts. And they began to go to work to try to totally displace the homeless. Now, they couldn't just raise the rents and push them out like they do in so many neighborhoods, like I saw them do in the Lafayette Square neighborhood when we worked there. When I saw them do to Mama Lester and Mrs. Bone on 39th Street, as I began to see it in neighborhood after neighborhood, even when we were at 4339 Gibson, what happened there, they made that the Grove, and they raised the rents to the extent the poor people are actually pushed out, or if the property owners make it so expensive for them to maintain their property, they're forced to sell. Well, at 1411 Locust Street, we were providing a place free of charge, room and board for people that were in need. So we began to see that they began to use other methods as far as gentrification was concerned. I began to feel like the lone Native American chief who saw the white opportunists attacking from every direction. And the bullets that these urban pioneers would use would be bombarding City Hall with emails, and we'd begin to see phone calls to politicians. And every time they began to see something concerning the police, they'd call them out and didn't do everything they could to make a case to try to shut down 1411 Locust. I began to see this unfold, and much of the media ignoring the hurts of the poor and homeless. As these urban pioneers would come in, they thought that they were making great investments in the community, actually a good thing, when so many of the poor people were suffering. And they were ending up out on the streets among the hurting and the homeless. Ray Rudlick, who works full-time at the New Life Evangelistic Center, going out daily, interacting with them. You're going to hear in a moment from Ray, and we're going to go hear from Scott out on the streets as he defines further what gentrification really is and how it really affected the 1411 Locust building, how it resulted in shutting it all down. Let's go to Ray.
Body warmers, let me see what we got here. How many blankets do you think you could use? Well, right there, 17 right there, we actually shoot.
Well, I'm trying to put my tent back up.
These are all hand warmers.
Oh, that's not a blanket.
Okay. 2, 3.
Yeah, he said 2.
Is that 2?
Yeah, I think you want to choose for himself.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
There you go. God bless you.
All right, sir. Have a good one.
Okay, you know what I had left?
Well, it's, this one here, it's a little dirty.
Things I had got destroyed.
This one here is a little dirty. You can have this one.
They can go on the bottom of the mat.
Did you get the hand warmers?
Yeah. Body warm? Y'all got body warmers?
I don't think we have body warmers.
Surgery in the hospital didn't do it. I tried to sue their ass.
Well, we'll give you one more here.
All right. And after I put my tent back up, I need all the cover I can get. I need me a, what you call it, propane heater.
Oh, okay.
It got taken. I can put it.
Guess what? Looks like you have 2 body warmers.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I need them from the...
Yeah, next week you're going to be needing them again. It's going to be getting real cold again down in the teens
Oh, yeah?
next week. Not the next few days. Next few days supposed to, so I would recommend you save those.
All right. I'll
Is it
trust you, I am.
Next few days are going to be relatively warm.
Hey, you got any bus tickets on you? Because I got to try to get over to Hampton and Forest Park to try to make me some money.
We're doing it Friday, you know, at the
No, I'm talking about I need to go today. I'd go over there. What time is it right
I
now?
don't know, let me see if I have any, maybe, but you know, Fridays when we
I'd
give
go
them
over and
out.
fly my sign and make some money.
Oh.
And if I make enough money, I go to a motel room. Because I ain't got no wood. The guy ain't brought the wood over here.
Did he ever call you back again? I only called and left a message for only once.
Is there anything is?
Okay, so Jim, right?
Jim, yeah. 480-2819.
2819, that's area code 314.
Yes, sir.
Let's have a word of prayer, okay, Jim? I know you're loaded down there, but Father, bless Jim, help him, Lord, to do the right thing and to follow you. Life, Lord Jesus, we pray for your healing and health and strength for him, and help him to get off the streets, Lord. Open the doors, we pray. Give him your guidance, help him to listen to your guidance in Jesus' name.
Amen.
My name's Scott Egan. I want to talk a little bit today about the term gentrification and what it actually means in cities like St. Louis. Gentrification is a term that's been in use for about the last 30 years as a lot of inner city properties went vacant. St. Louis had a lot of multi-story buildings that were actually part of manufacturing. The area immediately around Locust and Washington, from about the 1100 block to the 1700 and 1800 blocks, were factory buildings. They were multi-floor, largely garment factories, shoe factories, and then when that business went overseas, because it was, you know, Americans were costing too much money in order to produce the same amount of goods, then those buildings remained vacant. And then all of a sudden, a lot of, especially younger professionals, people involved in startups and in tech, and you know, the usual kinds of people you still find downtown, law offices, risk management companies, you know, buildings that are geared toward large corporations and service to large corporations. The problem is those people didn't want to commute from way out in the suburbs because they were spending too much of their time on the highways, and the highways kept getting more and more crowded. So they looked at a lot of downtown areas, not just St. Louis, cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, East Coast cities like Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York. But a lot of these people looked around at the former inner core urban city areas and said, we could buy all those old factory buildings or all those old office buildings and convert them into lofts and condominiums. People could go and work downtown and they can live within walking distance of where they work. So that whole movement's been going on for the last 25 or 30 years. Part of the problem is that as that happened, not only retail, but residential property values in the inner city, which is where a lot of low-income people were renting, skyrocketed. And you priced the low-income people who needed to be where there was public transportation, who needed to be close to their service jobs, a lot of hotels and janitorial services, restaurants, that they got priced out of the market. So they moved further and further out. Now we have a housing crisis in a lot of urban areas. Part of the housing crisis entails the fact that at the same time that the Department of Housing and Urban Development is trying to end homelessness for individuals and for families, there's no longer any affordable housing. You know, all the affordable housing has been bought up and converted to condos and apartment buildings, or it's been in single family or multifamily residential units, which have been sold for taxes because people could no longer afford to pay their taxes as the population aged out. And, you know, now we have a crisis. St. Louis has nearly 12,000 properties and about 8,500 buildings in the land bank. And unlike a lot of other cities who are taking those land bank properties and selling them to individual or consortiums of nonprofit organizations that are renovating those buildings and bringing them back up to code and putting making them multifamily units. The city of St. Louis hasn't built any real, public housing or affordable housing since it got rid of Pruitt-Igoe. They're getting millions and millions of dollars for buildings that they're supposedly creating affordable housing for under the HUD rules that they finance them, but they're not actually producing that type of housing. Another thing that they're doing is that as tenants move out of what were some of the more affordable apartment buildings that were converted and renovated using tax increment financing and low-income housing tax credit money, well, each time someone moves out, the landlord's allowed to raise the rent until, surprise, now there are no longer any units in that building which was financed with low-income housing tax credits, which are below 50% of the area median income, which is HUD's definition of low-cost affordable housing. So as we continue to price people out of the affordable housing market without providing them with any alternatives.
Much of this gentrification that's being done around 1411 Locust is by a small group of very vocal individuals that have a financial interest. They think they do. They think their property values will go up if they just keep the homeless off the streets. I mentioned the Brad Waltrip family. It owns 23 properties in the area. That family, along with a few others, are doing everything they can to continue to bombard City Hall with all kinds of emails, pointing out every fault among the homeless, blaming all the problems for the homeless. Homelessness has become new inward to these individuals. Now, not everyone that lives in that loss are bad people, because many of them are just quiet and they hold back, but what they've heard is all this bad stuff. But when we encounter them out on the streets or we encounter the businesses on Washington Street, we see that many of these individuals are very good and they're also very kind to the homeless. But the sad thing is that homeless individuals have to have some place to go. And when New Life Evangelistic Center now does all the repairs that are required, we await them to approve the final architectural plans that we've submitted. And as we await that, what do we have? This small group of people and this downtown neighborhood organization suing the city of St. Louis and New Life Evangelistic Center to keep it closed and not even provide day services during the day. So Ray Redlick and the volunteers go out to the homeless, wherever they can find them, both by day and by night. Because you can close down a building, you can close down a church, but you can't put them out of business, because that church of the New Life Evangelistic Center has simply moved out to the streets. Yes, the criminalization of the homeless is well underway. No homeless individual can be in the parks after 10 o'clock at night. We see one thing after another that's unfolding, where the criminalization of homelessness is taking place. In the middle of all that, the New Life team is at work.
Whatever works best for you, just as long as I can let them know. Okay. So if you wanted to meet him at the prayer meeting and then go out with him in the afternoon, maybe that would work.
Just don't see that door open.
Okay. Okay, well, you can think about it. If there's any other days, let me know. Thank get smells coming from the fire up there that doing that?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, like toxic smoke. Anybody want any sandwiches? You have to hold this lid open or it'll
Oh,
on his head.
it'll shut down.
What's up there, Reverend Ray?
Hello, how you doing?
I'm alright. Water?
It's Friday, so we're doing it over right over there.
Oh, okay. Alright. Give me a couple more. Couple more flies.
Want water?
It's Friday at the same spot.
No, right here.
It's gonna be at McDonald's.
Behind you, right here.
Behind McDonald's right there.
John, talk to you.
All right. What how many tickets we get this time?
Two.
Hold on.
You want some sandwiches? There they are. They're right there.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
This used to be a Greyhound bus terminal.
Yeah.
Don't see any buses anymore.
We got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
That picture.
6, 7 or 8 people. How you doing, guys?
Hey, them guys need something too. I got to roll a cigarette real quick. Glad to see you folks. We appreciate the water and everything.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you, sir.
A couple sandwiches?
Thank you. No, I just need one.
All right. All right. How you doing, guys?
Hey, Reverend.
You got more over there. That's all right. Don't worry about it. It's just for personal use.
This McDonald's?
Friday, 9:30. Just for backup.
Edward.
Like I go to Biddles.
Scissorhands. No, I'm talking about Eddie.
Yeah, he didn't have right.
So is he making any
He's sick, and I'm kind of giving him some, cough
the
medicine.
original Anthony or the other head?
No, already.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about my Eddie.
Yeah, that's
He's
what I
sick.
was talking
You're talking about my Eddie.
about. Yeah. You're ready. All right.
What's he gonna do?
He's sick. He's all right. He's sleeping,
There you go, man, over there. You're playing up here tired. We're over here.
He's
You
getting a
know,
little
get your own.
too old to be having their
He's been down.
It's okay. I got him.
Yeah.
I arrived just in time.
Maybe I want a couple of them. Can I get a couple of them? Outside. Yeah, we're going to.
He went and got his prescription.
Give me a minute. You can see
December
them.
when it's January. Cause I got him back on the 16th. He thinking it's December the 16th. He missed his medication for his, his inhalers. So now he gotta wait another month. But, it's always a problem solved somewhere. We solve it. What he needs, not cough. And he go to sleep at night. That's what he's doing right now. He ain't sleep for so many days. He's sleeping so much. I go and wake him up and give him some water, and then he goes right back to sleep. Ask him if he's hungry, he'll never eat, but he's sleeping. And he likes those Vienna sausages. He likes those Vienna sausages. mean, I'm trying to give him some of those.
I need to get, and I'm gonna find one today.
Because he likes steak for some reason.
Thank you.
I guess because he can chew.
You got no sleeping bag, no blanket bag. No, bring it.
So I mean, in my opinion, he needs to try to get out of the market and try to get his benefits.
We going through that. I don't went through that with him day after day after day. They don't deny him. They don't deny him. We don't went up there and he was passed
The failure of rapid rehousing programs. Rapid rehousing, which is the new model that Housing and Urban Development likes to use to try and end chronic homelessness, but that model only works if you have affordable housing into which to move people. The St. Louis has not created any more affordable housing to move the displaced people into, which is why we have a continuous ongoing chronic housing shortage. Part of the problem that is being addressed by cities like San Francisco, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York City is that they're building covenants into neighborhoods to keep neighborhoods affordable. San Francisco, over the last 10 years, has been converting a lot of commercial and residential property in the Mission District into land bank property, which in turn they're selling or donating to nonprofit organizations so it can be renovated and maintained as low-cost affordable housing, and with the small shops and grocery stores and things that cater to that ethnic neighborhood, so that not only can you maintain a diversity within the city itself, but you can also maintain people in improved living conditions, but still at a level that's affordable for them to continue to live in those neighborhoods. You know, it would be nice if St. Louis would be able to do the same, but a lot of what are called single room only places like the Mark Twain Hotel, the Jefferson Arms, you know, they're going the way of the dodo. They're being bought and they're being converted into apartments or condominiums. And people who need low-cost affordable housing don't have any low-cost affordable housing available. And the city of St. Louis gave everybody a double whammy because they don't have shelter space available to house all the people who are displaced when they close New Life Evangelistic Center. 2 people have already frozen to death this winter trying to sleep outside because they timed out of a shelter or they had some kind of an issue about getting into shelter. You know, we need to take a long, hard look at what we're doing. And either the city can take some responsibility along with the surrounding counties. It's not just the city of St. Louis that's at fault. You know, everybody wants to push the homeless problem off into the city, but this is a general regional problem where people who are making minimum wage or working part-time are no longer able to afford to even rent housing because there's no housing available. You know, we need to look at how we're doing this. You know, we can't move people from homelessness to housing if there's no housing that they'll be able to afford once the subsidies disappear. Thanks.
Awesome. All right.
Here these individuals are on the ground trying to stay warm in cold weather. And they've been criminalized just because they lost their home. And the real criminals are those sitting in the position of power that would keep a building like 1411 Locust from opening when it has all the beds in it. It's made all the repairs in it. And unless caring people rise up against the criminal activities, against a small number of developers and that have in their back pocket many of the politicians. Well, Lyda Cruz ran for office. She went in that loft building that you see. She went in that loft building and she told them we're going to put a padlock on 1411 Locust. She was able to kind of distinguish herself from all the others in the primary by being the coldest and the hardest toward the homeless. When others in the primary said, look, if they get the place fixed up, let's get the people back in there. We got the place fixed up. but no action on the part of the mayor. And the homeless are left out there. Now, when they want more bigger bucks from Washington so they can have, pay their employees to do their daytime stuff, what do? They want every homeless person counted. But then there's so many that are left out in the streets, and we see them out there, and they'll run up on them and count them to try to get more money in, but then they're left out there. And the organization that is there on the front lines that receives and has taken no city, state, or federal dollars, the New Life Evangelistic Center, is closed because of gentrification. That's what it's all about. And what do? They could refer to them as urban pioneers. And we can look back at the past and we can see the terrible things that happened to the Native Americans. We can see the terrible things that happened to African Americans. And then when it happens right in our own time period, so many people remain silent. I continue to address this issue regularly on the New Life Evangelistic Center Facebook and on my personal Facebook. We share with you and talk to individuals on a daily basis that are victims of all of this. Are we going to continue to let them victimize more and more people? No, we've got to do something at this particular time. What can you do? Number one, you can pray. Number two, you can support the work of New Life Evangelistic Center that refuses to be shut down. They shoved the Salvation Army out at 3010 Washington when it came to walk-in shelter. They limit the Sunshine Mission to just a handful of people, where before the Sunshine Mission and Salvation Army were doing so much right there on Market Street. People go out and work all day long, and they could come and get a place to sleep at night, but they tore down all those cheap hotels, and they just got nice green area in there right now. But where can people go to sleep? You can pray. You can support New Life Evangelistic Centers. It continues its legal battles. We go before the Missouri Court of Appeals on this whole patent petition over whether or not these people in the lofts, and they're locking us out of the lofts, by the way, the management is, so we can't even get signatures, whether or not neighbors have to approve what we're doing when we want to practice our religion, which we believe that the provision of shelter is a function of worship. So you can pray. You can support the work of New Life Evangelistic Center at P.O. Box 473, St. Louis, Missouri, 63166. You can go to our website at nlecstl.org. You can follow us on Facebook, and you can begin to write letters to the newspaper. You can call in on radio call-in shows. You can go through your own Facebook and talk about this. You can go out on the streets on a regular basis like Elliot Davis has been doing and sharing it on his Facebook. But you can definitely make a difference as we stand together against the ongoing human suffering in our midst. So many people are sleeping out on the streets right now. Poor people. They can't even find an affordable place that they can afford. We're trying to help them every way we can at the New Life Evangelistic Center, and we're going to continue to engage in this battle of gentrification where the cold, hard hearts of the few are thrusting so many of God's children to the streets. Will you join me at this time? Let me hear from you. Call me at 314-421-3020. Let's make a difference for good. Let's stand up in behalf of justice.